What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It is me, your boy, MattlessDI, aka Matthias, and today we are going to be showing you how to pull the engine out of your turbocharged Subaru. Now, real quick before we start on this, more than likely your car is not going to look quite like this, but everything as far as the formula is going to apply the same. As far as tools for the job, this is kind of what I'll be using today. Probably will not touch all of these, but I just have the assortment of 10s, 12s, 14s, a couple of 17s in there. This guy is for the factory clamps. I have an oil filter wrench. I really like these guys because they're spring loaded. Doesn't fall off quite as easy as the three-prong guy here, so I prefer to use that. These guys are going to be for hoses. This will be for like hose clamp. I have a magnet. If a bolt drops in there, you're able to pull it out. A couple of bolts are really hard to get to, so I'll take it and be able to spin it out once it's like hand freed. PB blaster is never a bad thing to have, so that is a good thing for this. Gloves are also very good to have here because more than likely the car is not brand new and it's probably messy. I've got an assortment of extensions as well. I have this really long one. There's a reason for that. I use a 14 that has a swivel. Gear wrench makes a really good one of these that is, I believe it's like their X drive or something like that. And it's basically these two combined, so you lose all of this. And it really helps with the downpipe as well as the lower bolts for the bell housing. So that's not a bad thing to get if you don't own one already. You can pick up a cheaper version of these guys that's like a full kit from Harbor Freight. You can pick up the more expensive one, whatever works. I like whichever one is the most low profile. It's not a bad idea to invest in a 3/8 and a 1/2 inch impact gun. Highly recommend that if you don't have that yet. If you just have a basic set of tools and you don't have all these things, that's okay. You can get away with it. It's just going to be a little more time consuming and a decent amount more difficult. This car's already blown up, so I wouldn't really go through the trouble of bleeding off the fuel system, but that would be my step one that a lot of people don't mention. You are going to be disconnecting these lines. Obviously, they'll look different on a stock one. You're gonna have normally like 3 lines coming off here. It'd be a feed, a return, and an evap. This one, he's got his own fuel system made, and it's a little different looking, but same concept. Just doesn't have the quick disconnect lines that you would use that either Company 23 tool for, or any of the other tools they make. A pick in some circumstances can do that as well. Normally under here, you would have a 15 amp fuel pump fuse. You would pull that and then you would turn the car over a couple of times. It may start and then die the first time. You just want to do it a couple of times to get all of the fuel out of the lines. So once you do that, remove the battery, remove the intake off here, and then we remove the intercooler as well. So the battery is just going to use tins, tins on both terminals, and then tins for the hold down as well. So now we can move on to the intake. The intake's gonna have a MAF sensor you gotta disconnect. You may have a box, more than likely. If it's stock, you have a box, or if you have like a cob or something like that. This one's pretty simple. I'm just gonna feel around, make sure we don't have any hoses or anything connected to it. We do have one at the turbo inlet, but we won't worry about that right now. And I have an 8 on here so that I can hit these a little easier. Free that up. And we'll pull this guy out of here. It's good practice to try and keep everything together. That way you don't misplace anything and put them somewhere weird, especially if the car is going back together afterwards. So now with that out, we're gonna focus on the intercooler. Stock intercooler is going to have the like PCV lines and breather lines on top. Should be like a little row that goes here. You just gotta take those off and disconnect them on the sides. You should have 2 mounts normally, so you'd have a mount that is over here, and then you would also have one that's over here. This one doesn't have that mount, so we're not gonna worry about that. You wanna check everything over, make sure you get all of the hoses and anything connected to it off. So you can just do that by feeling around. Each one is going to be different between like WRX and STI. Or the Legacies, Foresters, all of that. So you just want to make sure you get all that stuff off there. So now that I got the intercooler off, we're going to check for any connections that go from this engine area to the body on each side. So we can see we've got these guys here. And then we also have on this side, these little bolt connections. Just right here. So just want to check line of sight between the frame rail and disconnect anything that's coming over wiring wise from here. So you probably saw in the time lapse, I got all of these disconnected. These do go on brackets down here on the GD. So they just have clips on the very back side of them, just right here. I just used a pick to depress that, and then I was able to wiggle it and get it out of the bracket here. So that's the same on both these. On the side, just to show this, I unplugged like the O2 sensor, the other part of the wiring harness, all right here. So I just got these off. So basically I'm line of sight, just eliminating anything that ties this to the sides of the car. So now we're gonna focus on getting the power steering and the AC out. You don't have to disconnect the lines for any of them. Leave those connected. They do have their own connectors here. So this one has this little sensor here. On this guy, I already unplugged this and moved all of this over. This is the bolt I hate. Oh, it's not even in there. What a gentleman. If you're dealing with a car that's been taken apart and put back together, most people, and this is wherever I put that, this is why I have the magnet, is normally for the bolt that's down there. And I gotta use a weird way of wiggling stuff through there to get the 14, I believe, that's normally back in here. He's already got that out, so I don't have to worry about that, but you will, and it's not fun. For the AC, we have a 14 here, we've got one here, one in the front, and then one on this side of the bracket, just right above the dipstick. So 1, 2, 3, 4 for this guy, and then on here, we're going to have one that's way back here. You may have to use a swivel socket for that as well. But we'll have one there, and then we have two up front, and these should be 12s, I believe. So I'm gonna knock those out real quick, and then I'll take these, and since they have flexible lines, I'm going to lift them up and put them over right here, and power steering is going to go right here. When you do that on this model, since it doesn't have a reservoir that's up this way, you're gonna have to take this off. So that is as simple as pulling up on this tab, and then you can wiggle. Let me set that down. You can wiggle and take it off. So it's just this little tab right here that you press towards the outside of the body. While I was up front here, since I don't want to have to do anything up here anymore, I did disconnect for the pressure sensor, I disconnected for the crank sensor, and I disconnected for the coolant temp on this coolant crossover. So that's gonna be all the connections that are right here. You can kind of feel around, just make sure you're not missing anything. But when we do this top side again, we are going to take the manifold off as a whole, including the TGVs. So this all comes with it. So I'm not really worried about like taking things off. I really don't need to. I'm just watching for anything that goes and connects to the engine from this loom, because this is going to come off with that intake manifold. All right, so at this point, I've got the AC compressor off. I've got the power steering pump off. Power steering pump is over here. I've just kind of flopped everything over. Over here, I have the AC compressor. I've just kind of flopped it over, put it in this place. It's fine if this line twists like this. That's totally normal. And these lines are made of a special material that's able to take that abuse. So you don't have to worry about anything with that. That's not going to damage the line or anything there. From this point, since this car is decently modified with like the fuel system and the AOS and all of that, I would normally do more stuff down here, but I'm actually going to do under the car now. If you have like a stock car, what I would recommend doing at this point is getting the normal heat shield for like the downpipe off as much as you can up here, because you are going to have to hit the bolts and everything up there. So that would be a couple of like 10s, but we're not going to worry about any of that. I'm going to get this car lifted up because at this point, with the other stuff in the way, I need coolant out of the car. So I'll get it lifted up and I'll show you what we do underneath. So I wanted to touch base real quick before I crawl underneath the car. In order to do this job with only going underneath the car one time, you would need to take off, like I was saying, the turbo heat shields and the downpipe heat shields. He doesn't have those, he just has a turbo blanket on there, but that would allow you to hit the two nuts and bolts that are together for the top of the downpipe to turbo connection. You take both those off, that way when you're underneath the car, you can hit the ones in back, get the lower three, and then you can pull that downpipe off without having to come back up here and then go back down there again. So those are already off. He actually didn't have any in the top, so that's kind of funny. Yeah, there were no bolts in the top two bolt holes. for the turbo to downpipe connection. But since he does have an aftermarket downpipe, I need to take off the wideband sensor out of there so I can drop that down when I actually do get under there. Alright, so I'm underneath the car. I pretty much have no room, so I'm going to try and make this as easy as possible on showing you what you need to hit. So on your downpipe to cat back connection, you're going to have 2 bolts, just one there and one there. I like to start at the back and move forward. So from the back, we got those 2 bolts. You want to hit this bolt here at the hanger for the transmission. While you're around here, you want to disconnect this rear O2 sensor and then undo just from this connection here. Depending on the model, it may have this actually on the other side. So on this one, I'm good. I can just pull that out and then let it hang. I'll pull that around the side. Loosen these 2 14s. On your model, you may have 3 here, but on this one, just for the way the mount is designed, it's got the 2 14s. I'm gonna wanna loosen those. Don't take them completely out, but loosen them about as much as you can, because we're going to want to, when we're pulling the engine, jack up the transmission so we can get the studs for the engine mounts over the subframe. So then from here, I'm gonna use, like I said, I have that really long extension. I'm going to hit the 3 lower bolts for the downpipe to turbo connection way up there. This one doesn't have it, but you should also have a lower bracket that's going to attach from a lower part of the turbo to right over here. And you may have some shielding and things that you have to take off. You're going to need to hit whatever bolts you can for that and potentially get the other ones while you're back up top. When I move forward, I'm going to hit that bolt there. And then there's also one on top. I'll get it once I get the downpipe out. But there will be one here, and then just one, you can see it just a little bit further up on both sides, just same spot. So right there, and then one above it. So we're gonna take those 4 lower ones out. Once I get those out, I'm going to scoot forward, and on the frame rail, you'll see up through here, we've got the engine mounts. So I would hit this engine mount, and then same on the other side, just undo and take those out. And they've kind of done a lot of the job for me, because this downpipe only has 1 bolt holding it to the turbo. So just that top one right there. So that's pretty fun. While you're under the car, some of these are going to have ground straps, and depending on if you have like dual AVCS, a dual AVCS motor, you're gonna have 2 connections here. You'll have the other cam sensor and the actual AVCS connector there. So you would undo those. I like to take out the coil packs, or at least press in, since it's so easy from under here for me to reach my hand up. I'm able to press in on those to unclip them from underneath. So I just kind of reach around the motor and unclip those from down here. I'm going to drain oil and drain the coolant. On GDs, they really suck because this frame rail here gets in the way of everything. Normally you would have like what's called a drain cock, and you'd be able to undo that and it would spout down here or spout down from the side. On this radiator, it is on the side, but it's really unfortunate because the frame is in the way and actually encloses it. So if I undo that connection, I'm just gonna dump coolant all over this. So rather than do that, I'm gonna take off both the radiator caps, and then when I take off the radiator caps, I'm just going to undo the lower connection here, and that'll just spew out coolant from that, both from the block and the radiator. We'll let it do that for a little bit, and then we should be able to pull the radiator out once that's fully drained. Woo! This is POV of what it's like to dance with Phoenix as he bites your hand. Why are you biting me, bro? You never bite me. You just don't like dancing outside in front of people. I get it. All right, so now that we got the car back on the ground, I'm gonna start at the front and work my way back. So I'm gonna first get out the radiator. That's pretty simple. We've got the 2 mounts here, so we're gonna undo those, take those off. Sometimes people forget that there are fan connectors down here, so one on each side. Disconnect those, they're at the very bottom. We're gonna take these two hoses off, and the front hose and bottom hose if you haven't yet, and then we're gonna lift this up out of here. I'm amazed this thing did not leak. What am I dealing with, you ask? The connectors that don't want to disconnect. Boop, boop. All right, so at this point, now that I got the radiator out, I'm going to get a couple of other things out of the way. If you got a stock engine, you're not gonna have an AOS in there. All these lines, for the most part, are gonna be hooked up factory style, so you probably already took those out. I'm gonna get this out of the way, just remove all these lines out of here. On this motor, the windshield washer fluid reservoir is in a bad spot, so I'm gonna undo this and then pull it up out of the way. That should free up a little bit of room, and then I should be able to start hitting the rest of the stuff we gotta remove to be able to get this intake manifold off. Just want to note right now that worm gear clamps are so annoying, and this car has worm gear clamps on literally everything. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, come on, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, I'd see like 20 literally right where I'm standing right now. Some of you may hate the factory clamps, but I promise you I'd much rather undo 20 factory clamps than 20 tiny little worm gear clamps. These things suck. Ah, he's got them on these too. Oh my God. This sucks. What I'm doing right now, just to kind of explain, I mean, I don't really have to walk you through where each hose is. I'm getting the AOS off right now. I just have to get this line off. So I'm gonna take the hoses for the coolant. There's 2 hoses that go to the throttle body. I'm gonna take those off. That way I can kind of move this out of the way to get to the worm gear clamp that's underneath here to be able to disconnect that. Once I get this out, this is the last line. Like I said, you're not, unless you have an AOS. If you have an AOS, you probably installed it. So you know where you put everything, but it's pretty simple tracing the lines and figuring out where these go and disconnecting them. From this point, I'm just trying to get it out of the car so I can reach the turbo and work on that. So now that the AOS is out of the way and we don't have that problem anymore, we're gonna continue working from the front back. Normally you would have the quick disconnects, you'd unplug those and then undo the evap line. And it's super simple, then that's all out of the way. I got a few more steps because this has a, I guess I would say, custom fuel system. Then you can pull all these over, not worry about those, and we'll move on to disconnecting anything on the manifold that goes to somewhere else on the engine. So on each head, we got a couple of connectors we got to worry about. You would normally have TGV connectors, but this one has a bolt in there, so that's kind of interesting. You leave the fuel rails and you leave fuel injectors plugged in because that's all going to come off. That's part of the TGV. So don't worry about that. And then you've got your OCV. So you'll have that on both heads. You'll also have in this corner over here, you're going to have the cam position sensor. So that one can be kind of the most annoying to remove, especially if you have these hard lines in the way. But you can do it, just kind of sucks. If you didn't disconnect these from underneath the car, the coil pack connectors, you're gonna wanna do that now. But we're essentially just reaching around everything and making sure that anything that goes from this loom here to the head, or not to anything connected to the TGV, gets removed. In the back section, all you have to worry about on each one, for the throttle body, you're going to have 2 coolant lines there. You are going to have a knock sensor down here, normally a brown plug. On newer ones, they're black. So you're gonna unplug that. You're gonna check for any lines that are coming off of the throttle body while you're over here. Just make sure anything that doesn't run to the manifold gets taken off as well. You'll also have some PCV lines over here. So you wanna just make sure anything in this area by the turbo gets taken care of as well, so that doesn't come off with this and stop you from pulling up on this once you get it loosened. If you're working on a Legacy GT or a GR WRX, anything that has a plastic manifold, since they're not able to ground to the intake manifold itself, they're going to have a like ground strap over here on the back of the TGV coming off. It's kind of a big like L bracket looking thing, and it has 2 grounds on it. So you want to watch those, and then you want to watch for this ground strap as well, just the ground for the starter over here. So I'll start kind of taking these off. I like to take this bracket off. Some people use it to actually as a point to pull the engine out. I prefer to just use the bolt holes and things like that. So we'll worry about this in a second. I'm gonna just get this intake manifold off for now. You do have to undo the turbo inlet. You don't necessarily have to pry it off the turbo, because when you go to take this off, more than likely it's going to come off with it. Most of those are attached to the intake manifold. This one, being aftermarket, is not. This video is sponsored by worm gear clamps. Mainly the fact that you should never use them again. We called the owner of this. He did not put these on. Nobody blame him. It was the previous owner. Wherever shoddily built this. So at this point, I'm fairly confident. I've checked everything over. I know I've disconnected all of the connections that go anywhere but the TGVs or the manifold. I've disconnected the coolant lines and the vacuum lines from the back, and then all of the lines on the side as well. So we should be good to pull this off now. To do that, to get the TGVs off, you're going to have a couple of bolts. Let me try and adjust this so you can see a little better. These are all going to be 12s. You're going to have a bolt here. You'll have 2 in the middle. We're not talking about these top ones. We're talking about the ones down lower for the TGV housings. So 2 here, 1 in the back, and they just kind of go like this. With the manifold off, things are looking good. So if you're stressing right now, don't. You don't have a whole lot left. We're gonna work from right to left now. So I'm going to get the heater hose lines off. Then I'll get the starter out. That's just, if you took off the other bolt, it's 1 more bolt, a negative and positive connection, and that sensor wire if you haven't taken care of that yet. Then we're going to address the clutch fork. That's going to have a plug on the side that'll be a 14 hex. When we remove that, we'll thread a bolt into the end of that. Pull that piece out. That's the pivoting shaft for this, and we should be able to lift this up and take it off of the bearing that's inside there. That way we can get that all disconnected, so when we pull this apart, the clutch will not still be attached to the transmission, which would be a huge problem. We're gonna get the dog bone mount off, and then we'll get the turbo out. All right, so at this point, we've got the heater hoses disconnected. The starter is off. Pitch stop is moved up so that if we need to lift the transmission, we can. I've taken out the remaining bolts on this side. They're just the starter bolts on this side. We still have the 2 on this side. I got the turbo out. That was annoying because there was a worm gear clamp on that as well.
It's your favorite thing.
And then we got the, notice as we were doing this, so he's been complaining of oil over on this side, and he's got a cracked oil feed for the turbo. So that would be your problem back there for spewing and burning oil on your up pipe. With these all out, I just have to hit those 2 bolts there, and then I still have to disconnect because I wanted to show you in person how to disconnect the clutch fork. So we'll do that in just a second once I hit these 2 bolts. Phoenix! Good Lord, man. There we are. So at this point, you should have an M6x1 to stick in the end of this. You probably can't see that on video, but inside there, there's a little threaded piece. So you need to find a bolt to stick in there to be able to pry it out. Not very well lubricated, I'd say. Ha! So you're pulling that out of there just with a bolt. and the end of it. Just like that. Pull this boot out of here. Make sure that is disconnected. You can tell it's not engaged anymore, so we are good on that. So at this point, we are good to set everything up to pull the engine because we got everything all detached. That is all I've got for you in this one. If you like the video, let me know. If you want to subscribe, if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit that button, subscribe. If you want to be a stalker, like a really big stalker, you can ring the bell.
There's our house number.
God damn it. I'm going to have to edit that out. Obviously, we're going to put this on a stand and stuff. I'm sure you know, if you pulled the engine, I would think you know how to do that. Hopefully. Just uses the bell housing bolts, in case you didn't know that. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys in this one. I'm gonna go inside, wash my hands after putting this on the stand, and then try to never think of worm gear clamps again. And fade out, and slowly fade out. A large flock of geese fly by in the background, painting little trees. Is it fancy enough?
It's a pretty good shot, actually.
You like it?
Yeah.
Nice.
It's got some nice depths of field.
This was a really weird video to do point of view style. Never done that, so I'm interested to see how bad it looks. Oh, also, just a random thing, just to throw it out there. This was probably a very bad example. At some point in the future, like 5-year plan type thing, but hopefully sooner, if we have like a shop that looks really good where I can do this in a professional manner and make it look really nice and actually get shots underneath the car, that'd be cool. So yeah, sorry for that, but hopefully this looks good. If it looked good, I'll be happy. But I guess I won't know till I edit it. Are we done?
I was waiting for you to tell me you're done.